Why do dictators destroy their own countries? Well, your hypothetical example did happen. Lee Kuan Yew ruled Singapore with an iron fist, jailing all Communist Party members and forcibly relocating the rural villagers into high-rise apartments. Anybody that stood in the way of his vision of progress was crushed beneath the mountains of lawsuits. He used the equivalent of U.S. eminent domain to seize pretty much all the land in the country, in order to mass construct public housing, where racial quotas were set to straight up ban racial segregation, since now most people, 80%, live in those high-rise public housing apartments. He did develop our country from a malarial swamp into the metropolis today, and became greatly beloved by most of the people, but deeply hated by his opponents. They surround themselves with yes men because they kill the no men. Dictators like Kim Jong-un care more about staying in power and indulging their own desires than fixing their countries. They prioritize luxury for themselves over the needs of their people, using fear and control to maintain their rule. It's all about ego and power, even if it means their country suffers. Selfish, power-hungry, greed, narcissism equals bad environment. Think of its smaller scale. Got an abusive, selfish dad? Uncomfortable and dangerous home environment. One dude in control, who uses fear to keep people down. A person who actually wants to fix things. Their country would probably want collaboration. Multiple ideas, opinions, potential plans for the best route, but dictators only want it their way. You might like this video. Some rulers are more interested in keeping power than developing nation and developing country. Reforming things etc. might get them removed. But in reality, outside of extreme cases like North Korea, rulers usually balance both their security and actually developing and strengthening the country. Most obvious example, China is not exactly a democracy. But regardless of what you think about China, their ruling party does seem to fix the country. They have strong growth and living standards are increasing. Because they're not actually good leaders. They got in that position by keeping the people afraid. There are a couple of benevolent dictators who people love dearly. Tito and Singapore's are two examples. An unhealthy mix of selfishness and paranoia. They're afraid that if they fix their country, people will revolt and remove them from power or lose democratic elections. The goal is to keep them in line by giving them just enough food and brutally persecuting any resistance. Very often, the incentives of dictators and people around them who dictators rely on to stay in power contradict the interest of country overall. Maybe the most obvious example, country would benefit from fair and impartial judges. Dictator can stay in power and facilitate it if he or she appoints loyal judge who rules in their favor. Overall, for dictators, loyalty, competence. Amazing when both, but competent person can have own ambitions and probably popularity, while incompetent one relies on their boss dictator much more. Look at Shoigu, Russian war minister. He is dumb as FCK. Failed miserably during the last 2 years but keeps his position because competent warlord launched rebellion when he got dissatisfied and 25k strong army of supporters barely failed to seize power. Democracies has this problem as well, but democratic process 1 allows all ambitious people to have a chance at becoming top boss. 2 involves oversight from opposition, civil society, strong private business from building purely one-man loyalty and ensuring basic level of adherence to law. Point 3. Regular changes of power contributes to the last point as well. If your boss here forever, you can violate the law in his favor and be sure to face no consequences. While if you do something illegal and opposition likely to be in change in couple of years, you will be much more reserved and cautious. If you bring up your country, you may end up creating competitors within your country. Everyone fearing you means less chance of people trying to take over your position as well. Especially if the armed forces, other forces within the nation are treated better than the rest. And they know that if you go down, they go down as well. Putin, Kim and Myanmar junta comes to mind. Unless you are willing to give up power later and have a peaceful retirement, you will never improve your country to the point that there may be competitors later. And I guess it's nice to be a big fish in a small rotten pond, compared to being an average little fish in a large pond, at least for some people. Or the dictator may be in love with the idea of having the power of life and death of everyone within his/her domain, compared to having people who may call him bad and he not being able to do anything in return lawfully. To run a country, or any large organization, successfully, you generally need diverse viewpoints and ideas to make sure you're not overlooking a problem. Authoritarian organizations, government or otherwise, typically value loyalty over competence, and harshly reject any deviations from the accepted view. So you tend to get into situations where the right idea is not the accepted idea and stuff goes bad. CPG Gray made a video that explains some of the dynamics. Kemal Ataturk is kind of an example of the opposite. Simple. If the population only worries about their next meal, there's no way they would be able to form any meaningful form of resistance. Dictatorship with somewhat decent infrastructure, ease of movement and communication, and at least a well-fed population are in much greater danger of experiencing an uprising. Biden is a great example right now. Essentially, they use all their resources to bribe the people that could be a danger to them or spend them on suppressing the people so that they don't rise up. And then they have not much left to actually fix the country. Watch CGP Gray's Rules for Rulers video. It goes into this. The short version is that dictators force themselves into a position where they can't improve their situation. They trap themselves. It's extremely hard to get out of dictatorship. They don't care about anyone but themselves. As long as they're happy, it doesn't matter how many of their subjects are suffering. Nice PPL are not very good at this dictator thing. They either turn their country into a more democratic sort of thing or they die and are replaced by a more ruthless a-hole. Kim Jong-un is sanctioned to hell. Perhaps he and his family have a different ideology than the West, but there was a time North Korea was better than the South. Russia is what it is today because of such leadership. Singapore is another success story. It's not like democracies are great either. I name even more failed democratic states.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Eracast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.